So, Andrew, what do you like best about reading?
I like reading a book for the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth time and discovering something new that I hadn't realized before. What do you like about reading, Crystal?
Well, I like to feel like I'm with a group of people so that when I drink, I don't feel like I'm drinking alone.
Everybody, welcome to the Goldilocks and the Three Cares podcast, the podcast where we take a look at what's too hot, what's too cold, and what's just right with a self-published work. I'm maybe going to spill my wine during this podcast.
Why is that, Andrew?
Because we're drinking wine. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Crystal.
And what did we read this week, Crystal?
We're sort of veering from the young adult, new adult books today. We read Smokescreen by Tasha Lessey, and it's kind of cop drama meets alien invasion meets action adventure.
That's really good. And Tasha actually reached out to us to say, would you mind reading our book and doing a little review on it? So Tasha, in honor of this, we decided to break out a 2010 Italian Red. So thank you very much for the opportunity. What's the book about, Crystal? Tell us a little bit about the story.
The story starts with a seemingly random act of violence. A lone gunman enters a restaurant and proceeds to basically shoot and kill everyone inside. And these events start happening all over the world. So we have our main character, Jack Rossi, and he is sort of trying to figure out what is going on, what's happening in the world. And he is joined by his partner, Lauren Jeffries, who has a secret of her own.
And that's where this book starts to take a little bit of a twist, doesn't it, in terms of what you were expecting when you first cracked the book?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to freely admit here that this book is a little outside of my typical wheelhouse, but I'm okay with that because books are books and I love reading.
It's well inside my wheelhouse, though. Absolutely.
It is. Needless to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's probably one of the favorites that we've done so far.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the big reveal in terms of what the surprise is, because I feel like we're not going to be able to tell the too hot, too cold just right without telling what is behind some of those shootings.
Well, there ultimately is an alien invasion. So, the idea is that aliens are going to take over the Earth. They want to live on the Earth, and I think that's probably about as much as I want to say without ruining the plot here, giving away too many spoilers.
What was what did you find was too hot? What was there just too much of in this book?
Well, again, I really enjoyed this book, so it's kind of hard coming up with things that I found too hot. One of those things was what we like to call the Ghost Army.
Oh boy, here we go. This is a hot button issue for me. Tell me what we mean by the Ghost Army. So
what we mean is that this is taken from the Lord of the Rings. Where
oh boy, I'm great.
What saves the day is, in your opinion, a random ghost army that comes in to save the day. And so when we say ghost army in the context of a book, it means that whatever it is that saves the day seems to come out of nowhere, seems to come out of the blue. So in this book, I felt that the solution to the problem of the alien invasion is sort of that ghost army. It's kind of a out of the blue. It feels like a little bit like it's kind of just dropped there, so that they can have a resolution, as opposed to that being threaded throughout the book. So it's also kind of like a silver bullet where, you shoot a paranormal with a silver bullet and that takes care of that.
And it's difficult in science fiction, and this is something that I know authors are challenged with. In high fantasy, it's really simple. You go on a quest, you stick your sword through the evil sorceress, boom, it's rejoicing and over. But, yeah, boom. Yeah.
I don't know how your celebrations go, but that sounds like an explosion.
Well, doesn't have all Game of Thrones episodes end with a boom?
That's true.
And, in science fiction, when you're defending from an alien invasion, you need some kind of a magic bullet because you're essentially dealing with a 1,000,000-man faceless army, and you can't write a book that has you essentially go stick your sword through every last one of them to be able to end it. So you need something to make it clean, to give the reader really a sense of resolution about it.
Mm-hmm.
there's no good answer for this, is there, sometimes?
No, and I mean, again, I feel like I'm sort of pulling this out because it's more of a preference than something that didn't work with the story.
Yeah.
Or with the novel. But that sort of brings us into my too cold, or what was too cold.
Absolutely. And hold on. I'm just going to take a gentle sip of wine here.
Well,
what did you find was too cold, Crystal? What was there not enough of?
Speaking of, the point that you made that you need something that sort of takes the enemy out in one shot, where I really like an epic battle.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the person who loves fantasy and who loves that element of fantasy, where I like to see the battle unfold. I like there to be this really, a really sly way of overtaking the enemy, or there's a significant loss and they have to regroup, and there's a motivational speech, and it's a more significant part of the story. So I felt like there wasn't enough of these battle scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it still worked in the context of the story, because ultimately this was played out to me more like a cop drama than anything else. So it still works.
And what made it unique was that you also had the aliens' point of view in the story.
That's right. We did have the aliens' point of view. I guess we're skipping back to a little bit of the too hot for me. I didn't know that seeing things from the alien point of view was super necessary for me. Our female protagonist, Lauren, information could have been provided by her.
Yeah.
In some cases. But again, we're looking at this as from a cop drama where you have lots of different points of view. I don't even know if cop drama is the right genre that I'm describing here, but...
Well, I mean, and that's where it kind of becomes difficult to tell. It starts off as one thing, then it makes a fairly substantial pivot and then goes in a different direction for good, right. But it still does that.
Yeah. And I mean, again, these points are being made because that's sort of the point of the podcast. We're doing what's too hot and what's too cold. It didn't jar me enough to make me not like the book. I would have just preferred a little more of the protagonist's points of view. And then again, that being said, I still understand that the way it was done by jumping to different points of view, you still have your main characters, but in this particular genre of the cop drama, you skip to many different points of view, and that's just the way these types of books are written.
Yeah, and especially the ones with a vast scale, like a Tom Clancy type thing, where something happens in the very beginning that affects the very end. I guess as a writer yourself, tell me how difficult it is to essentially build a story that has two major genres, and to be able to turn around and explain it to somebody, to be able to turn around and really get someone who's in a position of authority in the publishing industry, an agent or an editor, to be able to take it on. I mean, it's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think in this case she would have had too much difficulty pitching it to an agent. If you go with a thriller crime drama, this would have worked. I don't think, again, there would have been any problems pitching this. But from my perspective, being a self-published author, it's brilliant because you don't need to define what your book is. You do in a certain sense when you're trying to sell it on Amazon, Kobo, and what else? The other different sites that you can sell your book on. But you don't necessarily have to go in one particular direction when you're writing. You can write whatever you want because
your audience is your audience, and they will follow you wherever you decide to take them.
Exactly.
And I guess that comes to the just right. What did you find was really well done in the book? What just hit the target?
So again, I think I've said this like 4 or 5 times now. I really enjoyed this book, and the fact that it's outside my wheelhouse and I really enjoyed it. I just want to say, Tasha, awesome job. And I tried to pinpoint exactly why I liked the book so much. So I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent. So
okay.
Bear with me.
I'm going to pour more wine.
You're going to pour more wine. Previous to reading Tasha's book, I was working my way through what appeared to me to be an epic fantasy. And I'm not going to name it because that's not what we do here. But it felt like the author was trying to use language and words to describe her world, and even within the dialogue for her characters, that it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, I've heard it described as, a smart person will come up with a very smart way of saying it. A very smart person will come up with a very simple way of saying it.
Right, and you want to be in the latter.
And Tasha was.
Because I did not have to reread any of her sentences to figure out what was going on. Everything was super clear and super concise, to the point, and at no point was I bumped. And we talk a lot about getting bumped, and at no point was I bumped. It felt like an easy read. And I'm going to describe it in this way as well. She has a very easy to read, simple writing style. And that's not an insult at all.
No, that's actually an extreme compliment. I've always said that an author's goal should be to be the book that you pick up in, JFK Airport when you're flying to Los Angeles because you got 4 hours on the plane to read. That's what you want to be.
Right.
Those people make money.
Well, there you go. So I read this book very quickly, exactly as you just sort of mentioned, and I was invested in the characters and I was invested in the story because the way you constructed, Tasha, I'm talking to you, the way you constructed your sentences were just executed perfectly.
Crystal, who would you recommend reads this book?
I am going to sort of veer off from my usual, anyone who likes young adult or new adult books. This is actually an adult book. There are several sex scenes, which personally I thought were lovely. But just, be aware that they're pretty graphic, so I would not recommend this for a young adult. If you are an adult and you enjoy that sort of thing, then pick up this book. If you enjoy crime, thrillers, sci-fi, also pick up this book.
And where can we find it?
We can find this book on Amazon.
And that's where we found it, everybody. And where can you find us, Crystal?
We are everywhere, Andrew.
Apparently. We are at the bottom of this bottle of wine.
We are... No, we're not. Now we sound like alcoholics. We are on Twitter at everythingstemp, www.everythingstemporary.com. You can also find us on iTunes.
Everybody, that's the Goldilocks and the Three Cares podcast, the podcast where we take a look at what's too hot, what's too cold, and what's just right with a self-published work. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Crystal. Until next time, keep reading. Previously to reading Tasha's book, you can hear the wine.